I'm really glad to be here today, and I want to be as brief as possible, and I wanted to set the tone a little bit, and then hopefully hear as much from you as possible. This is a space where there is a multitude of expertise in this room, isn't there? And there's a lot of lived experience as well as earned and gained experience in this topic, and a lot of interest, most importantly. So I was just hoping to set up the conversation a little bit, but not spend too much time up here. I would say really briefly, I have the best job in the world as a pediatrician, and working at the Odessa Brown Clinic forced me really, really early on to face some very important and humbling truths. Probably first and foremost that white coats do not confer upon you any greater sense of knowledge about what really matters to communities or about children's health than anybody else. That the idea of helping a young person travel through life towards success means that the interactions between health, wellness, and educational opportunity are so tightly intertwined that any attempt to separate them is a fool's errand. And third, maybe and more importantly, that the technical things that you learn to do in the spaces that give you the graces of letters after your name are absolutely unimportant compared to the social impacts, the social determinants, and the environmental experiences that we have around us. And with that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the state of things for education in this state, in this county, with a little bit of data, reminding us all that data gives us a chance to infer, data implies, data shines a light. Data that's accurate never lies, but data by itself never tells the whole story either. Is that right? So I wanted to just show a few slides and start with this one that just sets the tone for where our state is relative to the nation in terms of graduation. This should shock us. This should be one of those moments where you've probably seen this number before, and it should still bring a real pain into your gut, because this is a state with great resource, great opportunity. This is a county with incredible resource, judging from the number of towering cranes around us and the names and the people and the wealth that we have. And yet for us to exist in this place, 44th among all states, is a very powerful statement. The numbers change a little bit year on year, and the trends actually show improvement sometimes in different ways. But I wouldn't want a trend going towards improvement to be misinterpreted as some kind of great successes, because this is still where we are, 44th. You think about this and then you break it down by race and ethnicity, and you start to really understand that despite having an overall rate of around 80% graduation, when you break that down by race, you start to see some really wide gaps showing up in the data. Our state isn't unique in this particular way, but it is also striking that we have not done many things to narrow that gap in the past generation. Even as we see general trends towards improvement, the gaps actually stay pretty parallel. And that has to tell you something, right? About the deeply ingrained nature of what is a society that has been built up through racism and through socioeconomic disparity, and how the power of the dollar and the power of marginalization in this country is so powerful that you see it in real persisting numbers across the spectrum. I think about that, and I want to step away from numbers and just recognize that we're actually talking about people and lives and experiences, and not just lives and experiences in this moment, but this whole trajectory, this whole journey, this whole sense of opportunity and possibility. When I get to go into the clinic every day, and especially if I spend time in that waiting room with kids of all nations and colors and languages and backgrounds, all you see is, I don't know, if you're a chemist, all you see is potential energy. All you see is this amazing sense of possibility. And if you sit and think about that for a moment, then anything that we do that gets to the numbers that we just saw means that we have constrained that potential, that we as a society have done nothing more than constrain potential, and that we have a deep obligation to look at that potential energy and make sure that turns into the most bright, powerful, kinetic energy you could possibly see. You could tell I did a little chemistry when I was younger. These lost futures, these lost opportunities are the things that we should dwell upon and the things that we should think about when we start to understand how not only are we creating these disparities among different parts of our community, but we're harming ourselves from the future that we don't get to enjoy as a society because we've lost those opportunities among those individuals. Does that make sense? Or is that one of those pre-coffee kinds of statements that circles around? This is where I start to really feel the pain within these numbers as well, because the issues that lead to our graduation rates, our disparities, and our overall low rates nationally have their roots at the very beginnings in the spaces of preschools and early learning opportunities, but ultimately in the readiness of a child to enter school with all the gifts and tools and enthusiasms that they need to become bright and amazing, talented, thriving students. These numbers and the great gaps between these, both looking at it from a perspective of race and ethnicity and also from a socioeconomic perspective, are deep and powerful, and they set a pace, they set a rhythm, they set a tone that if you are going to overcome, if you are going to break the norm and succeed despite your socioeconomic status or the color of your skin, you will have to do something mighty indeed, because the forces are so set in those ruts. You can tell from these numbers so early on. What these also remind me is that as a pediatrician who works in a healthcare system that often waits too late until someone's sick in order to intervene and doesn't give me as many opportunities as I wish I had to see potential and culture, nurture, cultivate it, and watch it grow, that we need to really be thinking about the roots, the upstream, the fundamental determinants, the things that matter in the lives of people that might not know numbers and data, but know exactly what it means for their child to either succeed or not succeed. Equity, a concept that most of us are trying to get deeper and deeper ensconced in, really says to us that the solutions actually to many of the problems that beguile us the most are present in the voices and the experiences of those who are the most marginalized by these numbers. We have people with many different kinds of solutions. We have answers within the communities that are the most affected. And I hope we all think really carefully about how to be champions of those voices as well. These numbers are hard and they're difficult, and they are just numbers, but they do shine a light. They do infer. They don't lie. They don't tell the whole story either. And it's important for us to continue to deepen our understanding through both story and experiences and respect for the many voices that there are to speak to this issue. And I think with that, I would love to transition, hand it back to you, who I think when she showed up in our offices so many years ago actually came to give advice, not take it from me, but this is the way really kind people talk about relationships. So I will hand it back to you, and thank you very much for giving me a few minutes to open this up.
I'm really happy to be here today and to talk a little bit more about what we are doing to undo and begin doing the work to undo the inequities that are taking place right now. So at United Way, we are starting early. And how that looks is through different programs. And I will talk more about a program called Parent Child Plus in a minute. And I want to just tell you a little bit more about the communities that we're working with. We're working with communities, immigrant communities, communities of color, and we are taking a look at the disparities that we saw in the chart before, and we are figuring out how is that we can work together with communities to be able to reach the families and the families that are isolated. You saw that those disparities are pretty stark. And in order to solve those, we are working with communities that are usually underserved. A lot of those are immigrant and refugee communities. Because when children arrive to kindergarten, they are measured in 6 different areas in their first couple of weeks when they arrive. And that assessment continues to follow them to 3rd grade and then to high school. So during those first weeks, children are assessing things like social emotional learning. And in social emotional learning, they are assessing things like their self-regulation. So when they arrive and if they start crying, how long will it take them until they self-regulate and they are ready to learn? Or for numeracy, it is not only to count really quickly from 1 to 10 or 1 to 100, but understand when you see a number 3, it's that printed number 3 when you see it, and also that is verbally in your language and also in English if you have more than one language. So that ability to understand way beyond has to start early, because when you get to kindergarten, and if you're not ready on those 6 different domains that we call in the state WAKITs, if you're not ready on those domains, then you're already starting behind. So what we're doing is reaching parents that have been isolated. A lot of the times there's a misconception that parents may not want to learn about what the children are doing in school. And what happens is, especially if parents are new parents into navigating the system, or immigrant parents who have just arrived, the school system here is different. So it's really important to reach those isolated parents. And the way that we do it is with a program called Parent Child Plus. And Parent Child Plus goes to the parents. We go to the houses of the children through 17 organizations. So we partner with 17 community organizations, and those communities have home visitors that share the same language and culture of the family, and especially with the parent, they share the same language, and they are able to understand everything about child development and everything they need to understand in order to be able to support together their child and be together as their first advocate and their best teacher. This really, really works because my first language is in Spanish, and I've had conversations with people in my community when we talk about certain words that are not really translatable, right? So we're able to understand concepts that are related to the educational system and be able to then support those families fully. So those visits happen for 2 full years. There are 92 visits, and those happen at the homes of the children. We are reaching children of ages 2 and 3, and we visit them twice per week. And one of those visits, the first visit, we have a book or a toy for the child. And then, so what we know when we're talking earlier about one of those fundamental things that we have to support is the parent-child relationship. So in those visits, we know that the most important thing is not anybody coming from outside the community to show the parents, but what we are doing is fostering that relationship so that the parent will continue to do that for other children in the family as well. And so I went to a home visit, and I visited the family of Aliyah. And in this case, the grandma was the caregiver, because we work with these programs with whoever is at home. The grandma was taking care of 2 children, a baby and Aliyah. And when we arrived, and one of the reasons I should share that grandma is doing this, she had to figure out when to find a time to work so the other parents could work as well, right? So in this case, we showed up. Aliyah was very, very excited that the home visitor was there. She opened the door, and this was the second visit. So she had already figured out all her puzzles. She had a big puzzle with a bus, and so we showed up. She got her books out, laid it out, and was so ready to show us what she already knew how to do. And then she used that concept, the home visitor, of the puzzle to then put sounds together as a puzzle, right? And so that's the beginning of reading and writing, and it's so important for kindergarten readiness. So we are continuing to foster the cultural relevancy of the program, and that is something really important that, as you know, school systems are trying really hard to do right now. So we're really successful at the culturally relevancy teaching and learning part through Parent-Child Plus. Right now, we are reaching 1,300 families across King County. We are working with families all the way from up north, close to the Snoqualmie area, to families in Kent, Burien, Renton. So we're working with families to be able to reach them where they are. And we know that this works, also not only because we see it in the faces of children that we work with, but also because there have been studies that show how successful Parent Child Plus is. And in the state of Washington, OSPI, the Office of Public Instruction, had a study last year, actually, that was proven around the 6 areas of readiness for kindergarten, how those are very, very linked to the areas of to meet third grade standards. So when children are ready or arrive ready for kindergarten, and they are ready in most of the 6 areas of readiness, of kindergarten readiness, then they're very likely to do well in the 3rd grade. That is the first time that the state of Washington has an assessment. And we know also that if children do well in that 3rd grade assessment, then they will do well in high school and they will graduate high school. So when we talk about how are we addressing inequities, one of the things that we can continue to do is making sure that we are working with families. We're working with families of color. We're learning from them. We're working with them and being able to put these programs together. So in the Parent Child Plus program, as you can see here, it also has this consistency of arriving ready to kindergarten to be able to graduate from high school. And going back to the cultural relevancy and the importance of the program, we have been analyzing data, and we have learned that when we support community-based organizations of color, these are organizations that are led by their own communities, so their leadership, the board, the staff, and the home visitors as well, are of the same culture, share the same language. Those organizations are very successful at continuing to have families and continue to support those families and have the children ready for school and for life. So we had an assessment around the youth of color and found this culturally relevant part. And a lot of that has also to do with cultural identity, right? And catching it early. It is so important to start doing this work early. And I'm really excited also to share about another program when we're doing this as well. This is a program that we call Reconnecting Youth. And Reconnecting Youth is also really successful because we're able to, again, reach the youth where they are. And I know from my experience in my family, and I know from the experience in community, that it is really hard to support a youth when the parent may not have graduated from high school before, or when a new parent has arrived and doesn't know well the system. It is hard to know how many credits do you need, how many electives do you need, and especially if there are other things in the family that are not supporting the youth, or in terms of understanding how the system works, or other disparities that may show. So the Reconnecting Youth program is supporting youth outside of the school system to get reconnected back to school. And sometimes school doesn't look exactly like going back to a high school. We have stories like the story of Habik, who came from Botswana and then came at age 18 and had to be placed back 2 grades before to 10th grade. And he was ready to graduate and spend classroom time with peers of his age. So he found CareerLink, and through CareerLink, he was able to have a program where he could earn his high school diploma and at the same time also earn 20 credits in a community college that were getting him on his way to his AA and for a 4-year college degree. So we also have stories like Marite, who also went back and started going to high school, continued to go, but realized that they didn't have the credits to graduate on time. And so was able to connect with one of the programs that United Way supports as CareerLink, like I mentioned, and was able to then graduate with a high school credential. last year, we have been able to support 470 youth of color to get their high school credential, and as well as over 2,300 students who have been able to get their high school credential. So this is one of the really programs that we're excited about. We are working really hard at being able to talk with communities, to learn from communities, to continue to follow their leadership and work together in finding ways to support children and youth and families in order to be able to undo these inequities.